If you've ever worked on a document, some code, or really any kind of creative project, you've used some form of version control. You probably just didn't call it that. But before we get into the really powerful tools that the pros use, we have to understand the why. What's the fundamental problem we're all trying to solve here? At its very heart, any project you do with other people, whether it's software, a design, a book, it's a conversation. It's a process. And that process, that back and forth, it needs a system to manage it. If it doesn't have one, it falls into chaos fast. And I am willing to bet this slide feels a little too familiar. I mean, come on, we've all been there, right? Staring at a folder, trying to figure out which final is the real final. This isn't just a funny meme. It's the classic symptom of a chaotic workflow, and it is the exact problem that version control was born to solve. So, to get from that total chaos to a place of real control, here's our game plan. First, we're going to dissect that manual mess to really get the core problems. Then, we'll look at the two big ideas that popped up to fix it. We'll zero in on Get's brilliant Snapshot idea, see how that shapes your local workshop, and then finally, reveal the superpower this new way of working actually gives you. Okay, so let's start with the mess. Before we can even begin talking about working with a whole team, we really have to admit the problems we all face just trying to manage our own work. We try to solve it with things like this, right? We save a bunch of copies with different names, we use shared folders like Dropbox, or we email zip files back and forth. But here's the thing, these methods aren't just clunky, they're genuinely dangerous. They lead to people overwriting each other's work, tons of confusion, and absolutely no clear history of who changed what or when. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this all sounds like a problem for big teams. And that, right there, is probably the single biggest misconception about version control. The surprising truth is, it wasn't just built for teams. Its most basic, fundamental purpose is to solve the problems you face when you're working all by yourself. Just think about it for a second. You're working on your own project and you have this wild, maybe kind of risky idea you want to try. How do you do that safely? And if it all goes wrong, how do you just rewind time and get back to the exact moment before you started without that nightmare of manually undoing every single little change? Or, here's a classic. A bug just shows up out of nowhere. You know it was working perfectly yesterday. How can you look at a precise line-by-line comparison between the working version and the broken one to find the exact thing that caused it? And finally, what if you work on more than one computer, like a laptop and a desktop? You make some changes on your laptop, and then later you make different changes to the very same files on your desktop. How in the world do you combine all that work into one unified version without accidentally wiping out your own progress? This is what we call the solo developer's dilemma. So these problems, safe experiments, finding bugs, merging your own stuff, led the software world to come up with some real solutions. And two very, very different ways of thinking emerged: the centralized approach and the distributed approach. At the highest level, the difference really comes down to one simple question. Where does the complete official history of the project actually live? Does it live on one single central server somewhere out there? Or does a copy of it live on every single developer's computer? Now, what's really fascinating here is how this directly impacts your workflow. In a centralized system, you pretty much have to be connected to that main server to do anything important, to save a change, to look at the history. But in a distributed system, like Git, because you have the entire history right there on your own machine, you can work completely offline. Most of your work happens locally, and because of that, it's incredibly fast. And it's this distributed model that Git is famous for. It's all built on one simple but truly game-changing idea. This is the fundamental shift in thinking that makes Git so powerful, and honestly, it's the key to unlocking everything else. Okay, lean in for this one, because this is the single most important concept to grasp. A lot of the older systems thought about history as just a list of changes. They'd store an original file, and then just keep a record of every little edit, every delta made over time. Get? It just throws that whole idea away. Instead, every single time you save your work, Git takes a complete picture, a snapshot, of what every file in your project looks like at that exact moment. This is a great way to picture the difference. Imagine you're redecorating a room. The old way is like keeping a little notebook where you write down, move the chair from left to right, then open the book on the table.
The Git way is to just take a brand new photograph of the entire room every single time you make a change. You get a perfect, complete picture of every stage, not just a list of what moved. And this is where the magic really happens, because that entire photo album, every single snapshot from the beginning of time, lives on your local computer. Most of what you do is instantaneous. You don't need an internet connection to look back at the history or compare two different versions. It all happens at lightning speed, right there on your own machine.
So, how does this whole snapshot philosophy actually work day to day? Let's zoom right in on your project folder and think of it as a workshop. A workshop that has three very distinct areas you really need to understand. First up, there's the working directory. This is the easy one. It's just your project folder. It's the workbench where all your files are sitting, the ones you can see, you can open, you can edit right now. Next, and this is probably the most powerful and unique idea in your Git workshop, is the staging area. The absolute best way to think about this is like a shopping cart. As you're working, you might change 5 different files, right? But maybe only 3 of those changes are related to a single specific feature. The staging area is your shopping cart. You intentionally place only the specific related changes into it that you want to save together in your next snapshot. And finally, we have the repository itself. This is actually a hidden folder called .git right inside your project. So if the staging area is your shopping cart, the repository is the checkout counter. When you commit, you're taking the contents of that cart and permanently recording that transaction, that snapshot, into your project's official history. So this gives us this simple, really powerful 3-step rhythm. First, you modify your files out on the workshop floor. Second, you stage the specific changes you want to group together, putting them in your shopping cart. And third, you commit that group, checking out, and creating a single, meaningful snapshot that gets stored forever in your project's history. Okay, so we have the solo developer's dilemma, this snapshot philosophy, and the 3-step rhythm of modify, stage, and commit. What does understanding all this actually get you? Well, it's not just about learning a new tool, it's about gaining a creative superpower. You now have 3 superpowers. First, a system built on complete snapshots, which gives you a perfect and totally reliable history of your project. Second, the freedom that comes from local operations, letting you work anytime, anywhere, at incredible speed, no internet required. And third, the power of safe experimentation, the confidence to try bold new ideas, knowing you can always instantly get back to any previous good version of your work. So there you have it. We focus completely on the why, the core ideas that make Git so darned effective. By really understanding the problem of doing things manually, the power of a distributed, snapshot-based system, and that rhythm of the 3-stage workflow, you've built the solid foundation you're going to need. You are now ready for the how, learning the commands that bring all these powerful ideas to life.